Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, April the 22nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. I'd like to remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded for public access to broadcast. With that, I would like to have a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening's meeting.
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Colwell. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Reminded, motion carried. Remind everyone there's conflict of interest forms in the middle of the table. Should you have a conflict, please fill in the form, pass it into the clerk stating the reason. With that, we'll move on to item number 4, new business, and item number 1, Salisbury St. John ambulance.
That's me. There you go. I hate podiums. Anyways, you don't need it. Mayor and councilors and guests, thank you for letting us speak here at the council meeting. For those who don't know me, my name is David Ryan, and I'm actually a new member of the town, although I have not moved in 30 some odd years. It's interesting that the area of Salisbury is celebrating an anniversary, and Salisbury St. John Ambulance is also celebrating an anniversary. We were stood up in 1974. Just a little bit of one-upmanship. Although 250 years for the village or for the town, 50 years for St. John Ambulance, we can trace our roots back to a benevolent organization that actually started in 1099 called the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, which looked after the poor, the sick, and the injured pilgrims going to Jerusalem. We are the oldest ongoing organization in the world, and it's in almost every single country. By way of a little bit of history, we started in 74 as a means of pre-hospital care and transport, which is basically the ambulance. During this time, I did some number crunching. About 240 individuals in the Salisbury area have provided service to St. John Ambulance. And in that time, I'm a little bit shy, but I've come up with about 750,000 hours of volunteer service. St. John Ambulance operated the ambulance from 1974 until 2007 when the provincial privatized the service. We went to the Petitcodiac Salisbury Ambulance Service, of which the ambulance service, the St. John Ambulance, provided the core, the people, the equipment, and all the training. About 2 years later, it morphed into what we know today, being operated by the PANB. Now, we've had members, I said 240. Some members have been around they stayed around for a couple months, got the training, did a little bit of time, and then moved on to different places. I'm a fairly new person. I've got 30 years in. My esteemed gentleman to my left started in 74. He is indeed as old as he looks. After 2007, St. John still did first aid training and does today. We did event coverage for first aid, such as the bucket tournaments or volleyball, basketball parades. We participated in Salisbury Days, but the requirement for our service has become less and less. And of course, COVID hit and basically put a nail in all the volunteer activity. And it's very difficult to attract new members into the brigade when there really wasn't anything that we were being called to do. We can't force ourselves to provide medical services. So we sat down as a group and we decided, we talked about what we should be doing. And we came to a decision, and it was supported by the provincial council, that the recommendation was that the St. John Ambulance Brigade in Salisbury be stood down. If you want to quote or paraphrase either the Byrds, good musical group, or Ecclesiastes, if you're biblically inclined, there's a time for everything. And unfortunately, the time of the St. John Ambulance as a brigade is gone, or is over. We miss it. It was something we enjoyed doing, and it was a privilege to serve the community. We did ask of the provincial organization. We've done a lot of fundraising over the years, and we do have some funds available. Now, it goes to St. John Ambulance, but we did ask that, can we bring back some of the funds that we raised in the community back to the community? So I'm not sure which person here is looking after Helping Hands.
I mean, it is me, yes.
Anyways, we did cut a check for $2,000.
No
So we turned
way.
around,
Wow, that's awesome.
this was to help you.
That's amazing. Thank you. I'll get you
It goes, that would go to, it's on the back, would go to Mile Street, because we won't be doing it anymore.
Got it. Got it. Thank you very much.
I just, as a part of the group and as a representative of the people who were with St. John Edmonds, we just really want to formally recognize the council and the citizenship at large for the support in location, financially, and just in general that we've had for 50 years. And it is something we enjoy doing, which is really strange to say we really enjoy doing the ambulance work, but that is something we did. I think volunteer is important. And yes, it may seem a little bit ironic that I'm announcing that we're standing down during volunteer week. It's just the way the calendar worked out. Anyways, it has been a privilege to be of service to the village of Salisbury, or the town of Salisbury now. And again, we wish to thank the council and everybody at large for their support.
Thank you. On behalf of the town, I think, I think maybe it is apropos that it happened during volunteer week, just talking with the countless hours that you put in. I know that, I've had so many conversations with fire and rescue individuals or individuals that have talked about how you touch people's lives. Volunteering does make a huge difference in our community in 50 years. I think happening in the year of the Salisbury 250 as well, a legacy that you and your group have left behind in our community will always be told. That was what part of Salisbury 250 was capturing that history, ensuring that we never forget about the people that, again, as a new member of the town, but individuals of people are what make our town, volunteers are what make our town. And I just want to thank you on behalf of our town for all the work that you've done. And, we'll continue to do to share the legacy of the St. John Ambulance group, because he may be standing down today, but it'll never end.
Well, thank you. Well, the St. John's is still active within the province. There is a fairly active brigade now in Moncton, of which I'm also a member of that one. And if there's a requirement for that, for first aid coverage out here, we can do that. There's also pet therapy. There are multiple contractors for first aid services. And recently, within the last 2 years, as part of the Humanitarian Workforce Project, we have stood up an emergency response unit, which can respond anywhere within Canada now to provide long-term emergency services, such would be involved in evacuation because of flooding or fire. So we're still around. We are just unfortunately not active. I think the last count, we were down about 6 or 7 active members, and it was like from 240, but that was a lot of people. So who knows? I suspect that at least half the people have either ridden in or have a relative or somebody they know have ridden in our bus.
Thank you very much. A beautiful kind gesture to our Help Against Food Bank.
Quick question. Can I get a picture with them for the food bank? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's,
Do you mind having your picture taken?
can we have a motion for recess and we'll take it?
Yeah.
So we'll take Councilor Thorne.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Bannister.
Quick,
We're
quick.
in recess for picture taking. Motion to return back into session, so moved by Deputy Mayor Bland, seconded by Councilor Colwell. Questions of the motion? No questions, all in favor? Now back in regular session, moving on to the key one update for Salisbury Fire and Rescue. Chief McLeod,
Welcome, everybody.
welcome.
Okay, so this might be, it's not just Q1. We didn't do a wrap up of 2023, so I know you guys are super busy, so I will go through it fairly quickly. If you guys have questions, let me know. Okay? What we're gonna do is go over the org chart, just tell you a little bit about what changed. We'll go over the 2023 information and data. I'll talk about attendance and how that's changed, as well as talk about the challenges, the successes of 2023. And then we'll go into,
He's got a little clicker there.
oh, is this mine?
That's his.
Oh,
And it's backward too.
backwards. There we go. And then we'll talk about 2024 real quick. Okay. At the end of the year, we made a few changes. We had one of our captains step down and leave the organization. which then we promoted Roy Steves into that captain's position and promoted Taylor Wiseman into the lieutenant spot. We have 2 new firefighter members. One of them is Brent McLeod, my father. I will disclose that. He retired and he's been a truck driver forever. So where we got that new tanker, a great asset to help drive trucks because we have a lot of trained firefighters. And if we can get people to drive the trucks and run the pumps, we can let those fully trained firefighters do what they want to do, which is put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. Okay. Dwayne Ogilvy was actually on the department a long time ago, and he moved back to the village, and he was a captain on the department, but he's signed back up. He's retired as well. Here's our calls for the 2023. We came in relatively small compared to last year, primarily because we had, as you can see in January, we had a huge peak in 2023 with motor vehicle accidents there at the beginning of the year. We had way more fires in the year. And, we did climb back up in December. You'll see there's a spike in December. That was primarily due to the storms. There was a couple storms that came through right there and knocked a lot of lines and trees down. We were busy. But the previous year was higher than normal. This is more of our normal type of year. So I'll move that, but so fires in general, relatively the same. We had way less structural fires. You can see we went down from 15 to 5. Motor vehicle fires were the biggest increase. We did have quite a few of those through 2023, but they brought the numbers fairly significant. MVAs or motor vehicle accidents, we had significant, like this is what we go to 60% of the time. There was a big reduction, and it was mostly because we didn't have the snowstorms, the ice storms like we did the previous year. So the numbers were really down quite a bit. As for the rest of the buckets, they remain relatively the same. Again, little small increases. Our lift assists and medical dropped quite a bit, but first aid calls, we've been getting a lot of first aid calls dispatched to us for people that are having a hard time breathing or just various different things that we typically didn't respond to before. The school alarm, so the school is the biggest offender for the alarms. I think they've got that down now because we didn't have any in the fall, so that kind of reduced quite a bit, but they kept us busy there in the earlier part of the year.
Do they have a fine for that?
What's that?
Do they have a fine for that?
No.
Should consider that.
Well, I think that may segue into your.
Take them back that question.
Usually calls were down and other calls. We had a lot of rescue calls and I had to look them up because I wasn't sure. I was like, is this a do we miscategorize these things? But they were literally man stuck in machine, child stuck in machine, child stuck in tree. Like it was.
Same machine?
No.
Oh.
Like it was just various different things like that. And then we did have an increase for poles, lines. And with the down lines that involve MV Power, we can actually invoice MV Power for our time. So the town could go recoup some of the costs. With that, we just haven't been doing that because we just haven't had the resources to manage all that. But now that we have a
Now
little
we
bit
do.
more, we may be able to tap into that and that can be income into the town. Especially
for
if
the fire
they're-
truck.
That-
Pay for the fire truck.
That's right. Pay for the fire truck. Attendance has been going up. In 2024, we had 14 people that were not meeting the minimum. Now in 2023, we're only down to 5 people that are not meeting the minimum. So there was huge gains there. Attendance has gone up. Training has gone up quite a bit. There was a lot of complaints back in 2022 and earlier that training was not fun. We weren't doing a whole lot. So working with Brad to help organize training, I think he became the training officer in 2023. We started a committee to have more people because it's hard for one person to organize training because it's a full-time job. And this is 2023 when Brad was doing other things other than the fire department, right? So we brought more members on that want to do it, and they take turns running their own training, and it's been well received. It's showing the attendance going up. When people are showing up for the trainings, they're more apt to show up to the calls. They're more engaged with the department. So it's really showing the improvements. Threw in the top members in the last 12 months in 2023, but Abby Brewer and Roy Steves well above 50%, and they were just rocking it all year. So big shout out to them. I wanted to highlight in 2023 the time of day for the calls. So as you can see, the majority of our calls come in during the weekday. So I kind of categorize weekends as a separate day because people that are typically working 9 to 5 Monday to Friday are available for the weekends. But just weekdays, I did from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's when a lot of our calls come in. And it's been steady for both 2022 and 2023. So there hasn't been very little change. But you'll see down in the bottom chart is responders. The average responder has gone up, but it's still one of the calls that we struggle to get people out. So there has been a lot of focus that when I bring new people on, I'm looking for people that can provide that skill set during the day because we are short during the day. We're actually way better than we have been. In years past, we would have 4 or 5 people, but they were not the young people that you'd want to send into burning buildings. They were some of the more older, seasoned individuals, and it became a challenge, right?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
My understanding, I've heard from Petitcodiac in particular, that in the past, the Public Works Department, some of those people that worked for the town were used as available for firefighters.
Mhm.
Therefore, when you did have that weekday calls, they would stop what they were doing and then to whatever needs the firefighters or the fire station had. And I wonder if that isn't an opportunity going forward.
There's definitely an opportunity for it, but this type of job is not suited for everybody. Not everybody. can do
I'm
it.
not saying the whole public works department can go out and fight fires, not
Yeah.
that, but I mean, Brad, obviously, if he's in the middle of doing something for the town is one thing, but if he could take off during town hours to go help out with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To me, that would make a lot of sense.
Brad
And-
would,
and
Public
Brad-
Works, we would need more staff.
Okay.
Because they're often not here, but
I'm just saying that there's opportunity. I'm not saying it'll work for everyone, not everyone will be interested necessarily, but if they were available for the weekday calls, that might be a benefit to everyone.
Yeah. If they're interested, they can definitely talk to me, and if they're available during the day, that's a plus.
Well, that's up to Austin, I think.
So.
Stop
Well, that's
It's awesome. Love to.
right up your alley.
I almost drive one of the trucks too, I'm sure.
I definitely wanted to hurt.
There you go. Sign up, Sarah. I'll quickly go through the challenges. They're very similar to what we've always been talking. The lack of water, the lack of room. Just the other day when we had a grass fire, we tried to get our trailer out and there was cars all around it. They couldn't get it out. So it's a matter of hoping people leave their keys in their car when they come in. So we just had too many people in the parking lot, couldn't get the trailer out. Luckily, we didn't need it, but it's an example. But we're working on that new hall, so hopefully that will come soon enough. Aged equipment, the pickup truck is coming to the top of the list. Just the other day, we lost the jack on the trailer because the truck can't hold the weight. So, and it went down to 880 and they think it caught on the Bailey Bridge
Nice.
and broke it off. So,
Should invoice DTI for that.
yeah.
Brad?
But we got a new jack on it and it's,
I'm serious when I say that too, invoice ETI. Because they screwed that whole thing up royally.
ambulances dispatching outside the area. I find that seems to be getting better. I'm not hearing as much of it now where they're coming from great distances, but they're still most of the time not coming from Salisbury. It can be Petty Moncton, but it's not St. Andrews, right? Riverside, Albert. Right? And staff, I mentioned daytime, mental health. Dispatch is a new one, so we just went on to dispatch. Accurate locations. So they get the GPS coordinates of when the call comes in, but they can't send it to us. They can radio over the radio and give it to us, but you gotta have pen and paper to be ready to receive it. But when they send us the information for the dispatch, they don't provide it. Their system, their CAD system doesn't put it.
Cell phones?
So they're working on it. What's that?
They don't have a cell phone.
Yeah, I'm sure they do, but
Just text you that number. Stand.
well, it comes through our CAD system to everybody. It comes through to everybody. So if they text me, I may not be there,
Right.
right? So by the time I go, can I get the coordinates like we had on the weekend? Then I'm with a pen and paper to write it down. But it's nice if we can get the coordinates when the call comes in, so we know exactly where we're going. And that's missing. It's a complaint from all of southeastern New Brunswick. It's only southeastern New Brunswick that's having the problem. And it's just because the program they're using is not the same as they use for all the other PSAP or fire control centers through the province. Also in the address, they add abbreviations. So Salisbury is SAL. So if you go to Google and you punch an address and put SAL, Google ain't gonna know you're in Salisbury. So we don't. So that's another problem that we have with it. But supposedly they're working on changing the software out. That was the latest I heard. But when we last talked to them, they said they were trying to figure out a solution, but it's very frustrating. So successes, the new hall is making progress. So hopefully that will keep going forward. Our new tanker came in. We got the people trained to drive it. So I think we're up to 16 members that can drive the tanker, which is more than half. We continue to do cross training with our mutual aid partners. And as I mentioned earlier, the training committee was a big change. So 2024 Q1, so we're right on par with last year. There was 40 calls in Q1, there's 41 this year. January was high and January was high because, remember, it's me. Medical calls, yes, we had quite a bit of medical calls in the month of January, so that drove the numbers up. And attendance continues to improve. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that even though we were very successful at the end of last year, Q4, Q1 were even stronger. So it's been steadily going up. Some outlook. So there's a fire prevention meeting in April in Fredericton. Tim's going to head to that. We're going to have our open house in May here in Salisbury. The NB Association of Fire Chiefs is in the May weekend on the 25th, 26th in Fredericton. I'll be attending that. FDIC Atlantic, it's a great training opportunity that's in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. So we'll have some members heading there. NBCC does a fall training in Q3. So we're going to try to maximize and send as many trainers. We've been very relaxed and not sending a whole lot to these in the past, but we're putting a focus on getting some of these people that want to do this, getting them trained, right? It's great to do our own training, but it's nice to go out and get training from certified instructors. And then we have them bring what they learned back and organize training here with us internally. And we continue to go through the process to replace our SCBA packs. We've met with all the different vendors and now we just need to select which ones we want to go with. And then start going forward and try to purchase them. I think that's it. Are there any questions?
Very impressive.
You seeing things are very dry? Are we expecting a high wildfire season?
I've heard we could, but it's New Brunswick. It could rain in the morning and then be dry. The sun could come out and
Last
Stop
June, it
for-
rained from the 1st to the 30th, I think, right?
yeah.
Only thing was flat for local.
Oh, yeah.
1st to the 30th.
We did have a grass fire there last week. I think it was Tuesday night. And it just rained. Everybody thought, well, it just rained. It's not going to go. And it really didn't. It was slow because it just rained. And it had patches where green grass was starting to come up. So it didn't burn all around it. It kept going. But the wind was right and it just didn't go. And it wasn't going to burn in the woods. So it was going to hit the woods and die out. But it was a big field with a lot of tall dead grass in it. So it burned.
You're getting a lot of individual fire calls, are you getting calls now from people burning things in their yards?
No,
No.
no, we're not getting a lot of that.
I think your attendance is great, so congratulations for us,
Mhm.
because I think that's really nice.
Thank you, Chief McLeod.
Keep up the good
Appreciate
work.
it, keep it up, really appreciate it. Moving on to item number 4, dangerous and unsightly, fire prevention bylaws.
And we're gonna do 3, 4, and 5, all in one presentation, so follow along, but we'll throw it all at once.
Before and five.
Yeah.
Fire prevention, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. This evening, we're going to talk about the 3 particular bylaws that we've decided to work on. So we're going to do a little overview of what we're going to be talking about this evening. So we're going to do the bylaw respecting the Salisbury Fire Rescue and Prevention and Extinguishment of Fires, bylaw respecting animal control, and bylaw respecting dangerous and unsightly premises and property. So municipalities can implement bylaws pursuant to Section 10 of the Local Governments Act, and the Section 40 of the Local Governments Act speaks to the former bylaws not to apply to restructured entities. And it gives us Section 72 of the Local Governments Act to appoint delegates to enforce these duties as permitted under Section 9-1 of the Act. Some of the bylaws, such as dangerous and unsightly, are adopting provincial regulations to assume enforcement duties without ability for significant changes. So the process began with the direction from council in 2023 to prioritize a few of the bylaws as we move into town and the new boundaries. So in 2024, a bylaw working group started the process and we reviewed 3 priorities, which today, this evening, I'm going to talk about for draft direction and input. So upon the direction to proceed, we're going to seek required input from legal appropriate departments such as the fire department, as well as our contractors such as NBSPCA as well. Once that has been done, first and second reading at subsequent council meeting by title only. Once we reach that, we will issuance of public notice as per Section 70 of the Act for a minimum of 2 weeks to solicit public input. And then we should have the third reading to council and then we'll enact the bylaw. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Salisbury Fire Rescue and the Prevention and Extinguishing of Fires. So the overview for this particular bylaw is we're going to have the fact that we're going to regulate the Salisbury Fire Rescue Department. Within this bylaw, some entities have separate bylaws just for one, usually for the department, and then the rest with the extinguishment of fires as well. We're going to outline the requirements for outdoor fires and outline the minimum requirements for bonfires, as well as regulate the use of fireworks, the prohibits of waste burning, and authorization jurisdiction under the Fire Prevention Act. So this changes with this particular bylaw applies to the full town boundaries. So there's going to be no change to the bonfire requirements in Ward 3, as previously stated in the old bylaw. Fireworks are not permitted in Ward 3 unless considered a firework display with required permit. To kind of give you some context, a firework display would be something that would be done on community days, as that would be considered a firework display. This bylaw changes in the bylaw will also authorize the town, chief, deputy chief, and those appointed by council to enforce the Fire Prevention Act. And again, in addition to section, we'll be including the Salisbury Fire Rescue Department within that bylaw to do so. Input from council is that we're looking for a general agreement on the firework requirements. Approval to include fire department in section in this bylaw. And if the agreement on the bylaw requirements, an agreement to appoint authority to enforce the Fire Prevention Act. And finally, the agreement on requirements for former village versus former LSDs.
We can do recommendation on the floor and then we'll go same presentation, but we'll go bylaw by bylaw for questions and input. So
I'll move that council direct staff to bring the bylaw titled bylaw number 9, a bylaw related to Salisbury Fire Rescue and the prevention of extinguishment of fires in Salisbury as drafted for first and second reading at a future council meeting.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Colwell, seconded by Councillor Obelinas. Questions to the motion?
I do have a question about the fireworks being restricted in Ward 3 only. Is it more dangerous to have fireworks in Ward 3 versus the rest of the wards? I assume it's not. And is there a reason why there wouldn't be areas in the other wards where we wouldn't want to allow fireworks as well?
I think the biggest concern is how closeness the houses are.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of variables as far as the quality of the fireworks that people are buying.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's louder because the houses are so close together, it's going to make that, and there's a lot more animals in Ward 3, right? And the fireworks are play havoc with animals, and it's just more of a challenge that something could go wrong because of the fact that everybody's so close together. Outside the area, people have more area, they have more space, acreages and stuff like that, which do bigger areas, so.
But there are pockets where there is more density, and would it be better to word the bylaw in that regard where it's density of dwellings rather than singling out a specific ward that this doesn't apply to, or that it does apply to?
Yeah, we can definitely look at seeing what we can do for sure.
are you thinking like subdivisions? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's like subdivisions, right? Like, because if we're not allowed to have fireworks in the town center because you're close to your neighbors, but Riverbend or Boundary Creek can, and their houses are, as in some cases, houses are as close.
Same kind of question, but on the bonfire, so I'm trying to understand what's happening with fire regulation. So outside wards never had any regulations at all, now they're going to, right? So I'm just like, should we keep it the same for everything, like fireworks and bonfires, like same rules apply to everybody and not have like, because now we're making the bonfires apply to everyone. Should fireworks also apply, no fireworks also apply to everyone?
Right.
I just don't know.
But just to be clear on the outside fires, that has to, in an appliance, you cannot have a bonfire on the ground
Correct.
in the outside ward.
Yes.
Cause fire is
Anything
fire.
outside, if somebody has, they're clearing land, I mean, everybody has, you know, the size of lots that are within Ward 3, there's not a lot of room. So,
I think he's asking the opposite.
Yeah.
Outside of Ward 3, you don't need to be in an appliance, right?
You
Very
do
clear.
now.
it's recommended.
But in the
I don't
bylaw.
care.
But this is,
I'm
this is,
asking
this
if
is the
it's-
conversation that we have as far as input council.
Because if you're saying you can't have a campfire beside, you're camping in the woods, you can't have a fire beside that. That fundamentally is an issue.
In an appliance you can with a screen now, right? We're asking for
Yeah,
screens.
because are we moving all camping to campgrounds? Like, woods are not appropriate place to camp? That's where I would go with that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So I'll jump in too, because there's provincial legislation too that requires certain, like the larger ones, I think you were referring to, that would still apply regardless, no matter where you are. And then it's the sake of,
In terms of like lightning clearing, in terms of
Yeah.
big
Yes,
brush
yeah,
fires,
yeah,
okay?
yeah. So those would still apply, it's under provincial legislation, applies same everywheres. And then from a bonfire perspective, that's why we're coming here tonight to figure out. And the other piece too is that it will still, this will still go to the department as well. I can't speak obviously to calls it would be for you guys in terms of what bonfires may start or not start in the outside wards. But that's what we're here trying to get some input on today.
I think most people in the outside wards always go with the provincial legislation of fire restriction. Like, is fire restriction on or is it off? To your point,
That's
Austin.
its
You have to do that
priority, it doesn't
regardless.
matter what
And
ward
you have
you're
to do that
in,
regardless.
whether you have a
Right.
appliance or not. If it's a fire ban on, it's, you
Right.
can't have your.
Yeah,
you
and
can't have-
Right.
everyone has followed that quite closely
Right.
because like it's prudent.
Right.
But to say that no waste can be burned, I'm assuming therefore you can no longer burn, have a house burned by the fire department.
There's exclusions in there for training purposes.
Yeah, there's exclusions.
Same thing, same with provincial legislation, those same exclusions apply.
There is also exclusions for waste burning.
In terms of,
Well, it says, burning waste permitted in certain geographical boundaries as described as Schedule C of the bylaw.
I would suggest taking it to Eco 360 though. For your.
And those are the category permits from DNR, so those still.
But that waste is like
Brush.
fallen.
Free.
Oh, okay. Not,
It's not like your
Your
truck. It's not your
garbage.
car.
Okay.
Great.
People are, they fallen trees or they're cutting dead limbs off and they need to
so like
burn
brush.
it, absolutely, like that's, you
Yeah.
don't consider
or a
that.
rotted baby barn or something to that effect. Sometimes it doesn't always make sense. Try to bag that in garbage bags and put it to the side of the curb.
So,
But this is density versus not density, and
Yeah.
that's what I see this whole argument is based on.
Yeah.
Things you
Yeah.
would not want to do here, but has no bearing on anything in the outside wards.
But
Right.
in that case, wouldn't that be something that they could approach the fire department and say, hey, I want to burn my baby barn this weekend and try to get a permit for something like that to make sure that it gets done correctly and doesn't.
Do you guys want to deal with every brush pile around?
No, but those are still, I think,
It
you're
doesn't make
using
it-
barns, right?
He's talking about my baby.
A baby-
barn
a baby
being
barn,
Well, it's the
yes.
same thing if it's almost like an abandoned house. You just can't go burn a house with everything.
I think you're right.
Lots of people have these marks.
And cut it into pieces in.
And then it's now a demolition, and then you have a debris pile.
That's
Like, it's
something
just,
manageable.
like, is there a size that you then have to call or not call, like, for permitting, like?
Yeah,
seems
that's,
cumbersome.
there are categories, I think there's 4 categories of fires through DNR that has to be placed through the, it's the Forest Fire Act that you go and call. There's a 1-800 number, I do believe, on their site. Fireban NB, I think is their NB Fireban, and it'll give you the phone number to call. And then they'll ask you a few questions and come out, because it goes in size. And they want to ask, where are you burning it? How close is it to the woods? And then they'll come out, do an inspection, and then grant the permit, whether it's viable or not, and yay or no. So.
So I'm a little bit worried we're trying to over control something that's potentially not an issue.
And thinking of bylaw that's not enforceable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because for me, my personal opinion, I know at one point we talked about not even having a fireworks bylaw just because people are doing it anyways. And I'm not saying go that extreme, but I do feel like there's a quality of life difference between the outside wards and I'd say quality of life. It's not really, it's a lifestyle difference in the sense of what you're used to with burning brush and things like that. And I do feel like if we're gonna have a fire, it's because people are gonna do it anyway, irrelevant of the bylaw. But I don't know if maybe it's less restrictive in the sense of if something you do causes a forest fire, then you're issued a fine. But I don't know that over controlling it's gonna make the town happy,
Fireworks or bonfires?
all of it.
Well, I think in and of itself, like the
I
fireworks
just don't
thing,
think it's gonna make residents happy.
if you have a specific residence that every weekend they're going on and on with fireworks, the having like a nuisance law for fireworks, that makes fundamentally a lot of sense because you're pissing off your neighbors. But
Or the noise, or the
Exactly, or the
animals.
noise,
Scaring the
or-
animals is a big thing.
fair enough.
Yeah.
I guess my question to Brad is there low hanging fruit that you guys would like to see cleaned up from a firefighting perspective, that these are predominantly a problem, whether it's the grass fire that just happened, that people are trying to do things that they shouldn't be doing properly, that should be regulated from our perspective? Or is this just a whole bunch of red tape that really wastes time?
Yeah, so my perspective with it is that, I'll come over here, sit next to you. My perspective with it is we don't want to, like before in the past, we had to be CSA approved, had to be covered in the net, like a mesh fence. I don't think we want to go down that road. But what we want to do is make sure that you're following the provincial guidelines, okay? You're not burning near potential exposure, and you're burning in a safe manner where you're monitoring the fire. You have appropriate measures if it gets out of control to deal with that fire. And I think that's what we need to focus on. And that also includes outside of just Ward 3, right? Because we've gone to some where people are burning garbage and the smoke's blowing into their neighbor's house. Well, that's not right, in my opinion. Also where they're burning right next to a shed, right? They shouldn't be doing that. We've been to fires where people have burnt their shed down and then their house because of that. So
Makes their insurance company very happy, I'm sure.
yeah, so I think it's just to kind of make sure that they're being cautious with what they do. I don't really want to get into defining exactly, what it needs to be put in or anything like that. Just that they need to be cautious with what they're doing.
So the current bylaw that we have for the current Ward 3, were those restrictions appropriate
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And
For Ward 3.
for Ward 3?
yeah,
I mean, the density of houses are on top of each other.
yeah, correct.
Are we talking bonfires or fireworks right now?
Bonfire.
Okay, so
We
what
can
you're
have a-
saying though, is in Ward 3, that's what you would suggest be expanded to all the
Yes.
wards, because that makes it safer that way.
Yes.
Okay.
I think, Councillor Dykstra has a point though, that people are gonna, if you're gonna go out and backpack into the woods and camp somewhere, you're not gonna carry an appliance with you to use. I don't know that it's a realistic expectation, or
Well, again, even applying this in of itself for a period of, it doesn't necessarily have to be enforced to the letter of the law for everything. Like, again, Brad's gonna be busy enough as it is trying to enforce all the stuff, let alone
Well,
every person
I would
running.
pause you. if it's a bylaw, it does need to be enforced to the letter of the law, and can we, is the
It can
question.
be, yes,
Because
but it
it's,
doesn't.
he's one person.
Well, we mentioned Riverbend earlier about fireworks. Well, Riverbend, most of the properties are 3 to 4 acres, many of those in that subdivision. I'm guaranteeing you they're doing fires today, and none of them have the same fire pits that they have in our community right now. And to have that enforced later, I just think it's unduly putting something in place that can't be enforceable.
And I don't think we should be enforcing the fire pits that they have.
So we have to put a section basically that speaks to distance,
Yeah.
monitoring. You heard a third thing that I didn't write down, distance monitoring.
And a way to prevent, or to put it out,
Yeah.
response, like a,
Extinguisher.
yes.
Yeah, if we,
Extinguishments, okay.
if we start putting in a bunch of, I think I misunderstood what we were doing up until now, but,
It's okay. Welcome to the party.
I love that. If we, this is what the people in the outside wards have been afraid of, if we try to put a whole bunch of rules on them, we don't want to do that.
No.
Not unless.
But the rules, I thought this is what we talked about.
But the rules that we're putting on aren't restrictive either though.
Well,
Like,
that's-
like if you put aside the appliance.
Yes.
If you're,
I'm
if
okay
you're,
with it
if you're burning even in the outside wards, you shouldn't be doing it next to a building.
Yes.
You should have a way to extinguish the fire if it gets out of control.
And you should be monitoring.
And you should be
Should be
monitoring.
And no, like, to me, that is like bringing it to a level that's controllable, right?
Yes.
That's very fit for risk, in my opinion, in the outside wards, right? If you're a huge farmer's field and you're burning a pile of stuff in the middle of it, have at her, as long as you can put it out and.
I just want to just say, make a quick comment, because it's gonna be a little bit crass, but are we talking about bylawing common sense? Because that's
what
kind of.
I was just
That's
gonna
pretty
say
much
the same thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty much
Exactly the
any
same
bylaw
thing.
piece of legislation ever.
Councilor Bannister's saying something.
This is 150% common sense, and I'm gonna tell you that anyone in a rural area, they don't want their barn or their house burning any more than we
Yeah.
do or Brad wants to. Like, common sense is exercised duly. In the event, you're still gonna have careless people out there, no matter what you do.
Yeah, but the bylaw gives us the tool for it to be reported and dealt with.
Yes, for nuisance,
Right.
nuisance.
So when we respond to a fire, if it's a green day, they can burn and everything is set up, they can continue to burn. But if we get there and nobody's around, we're putting that fire out.
Yeah.
If they're there and it's not being done in a safe manner, we're putting it out, right? And that's what this is for, is to kind of say, if we show up and this is like this, we're putting it out. And we've been doing it outside of Ward 3 for a while.
So is it possible to have it so it kind of tiers, like you follow the provincial guidelines and the provincial recommendations?
Yes.
And if you're burning within X feet of a dwelling, a facility, anything that's combustible, you must have an enclosed. Otherwise, please proceed with caution or something.
Well,
I don't
think-
know if it's, if there's a way to have it so that, even in the outside wards, if you're burning next to your home, right, within 20 feet, it should be enclosed if that's the recommendation. Like, maybe it's easier explained if we just kind of put a few.
The DNR piece still applies regardless. I think the question vests around the definition of appliance is what it is. So we can see what that looks like, because I think that's, everything else is standard. Like, based on the conversation today, it's keeping it away, like more than 3 meters from a structure or dwelling, not placed on a combustible platform, that it keeps
Yeah.
going. So those are standard, and to the
Yeah.
comments, our
I
comments.
agree, I was going to
They're
Councilor
common.
Cole,
Yeah.
it's the last
Right.
milestone, whatever that included, whatever that is that they're allowed to have.
I'll also say, if common sense was common, we probably wouldn't need a fire department as much as we do, so.
Right.
It's like,
For the liability of the municipality, you
Yeah.
need to spell it out. Like, you can't just say use common sense, done, period. Like,
The other thing to add on that is the materials that they're burning, right? We can't have them burning garbage.
Is that in the provincial guideline or the provincial? Is there like a provincial what not to burn
Be an environmental violation.
All defined garbage.
or no?
we did
Well,
define
what we
waste.
did is we actually said what was approved to.
Yeah. Waste means trash, garbage, litter, or any items deemed for disposal, including but not limited to items made containing construction or demolition material, including but not limited to painted or treated wood, railway ties, sawdust, wood shavings, planking, siding, wood beams.
So used oil, would that can be considered?
We urge you to take it to
Yeah.
hazardous waste.
Yeah, it's a common
Yeah.
sense, right? That's a common sense question.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
But I would say that the bylaw should, I don't know how it works, but someone who sets a fire, causes a fire, and they're fined. That if this shouldn't be facilitating the fine. If somebody was careless, who was not attentive, who not, things are getting out of.
You're saying it should be.
It should be tailored to facilitate finding people who are not doing things appropriately.
Resulting in
It resulting in
a fire.
And it does
time,
have
the time and effort being.
a fine structure, right?
Which I think,
And that's what this whole conversation is about, is making sure that we make, we don't want to ruin their evening of not having, but making sure that they understand that there are consequences if they don't follow a set of rules.
If you're outside the guidelines, these are the fine structures that will
Correct.
facilitate.
My biggest concern is, people like if you had 10 acres that you were clearing and you have it in your field, making sure that you do go and make sure you call DNR and just ask the question, come on out, get that permit, and that it's done correctly. That's where, because I'm more worried about people calling them in this size of brush pile after the permit's given goes into this big. So then it's a whole different
Oh,
kettle of fish that we're talking about. So that's where people get in trouble, if it's windy, like you said, common sense is sometimes not common, but, it's just trying to, protect us as a municipality to put these, bylaws in place.
Because
So that we can all have fun and be safe.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, that's where I do say it does have to be contained. Just because otherwise you'll need 10 or 12 more of you just to try to manage all of those
Yeah.
potential.
I'm all for the reason why. I
Yes.
just want to make sure we're not over controlling something that we can't administer and that people are going to do anyways, and that it's a lifestyle for them already.
There's no permitting process for bonfires, so we're not going to inspect.
I know, I'm just being honest, like,
But
when I
it's-
read this, I thought, oh, every LSD is going to not like this, just the way it was worded. I don't know if it's just that I'm.
But I think-
Get everybody from having fire ever. Like, we know that's what's gonna happen on social media, but it is common sense written down.
And we'll look at the definition of appliance to make sure that doesn't constrain. I think that's the only thing that I think will change. Um,
Lots of people have bonfires without anything.
yeah, but the way the word apply is, we'll look at the word appliance, because I think that will change the only piece, because it basically just needs to be an enclosed, non-combustible enclosed structure. That's pretty much what it is, which most people,
While you watch the drone.
I think a majority of people have
that's what we're.
some type
But I
of.
do too. I think to Councillor Cole's part, if we can assure that, I think most people will say they don't want the fire to be from their home. They don't want their house on fire.
Right.
I mean, the fact you have to put the.
What about the fire pits with rocks around them?
I just think it's a communications nightmare that you're gonna have, all of us are gonna get nothing but phone calls and emails over this.
Yeah, I agree.
I would stay away from, putting in enclosure. It's very rare we go to a fire where someone's got an enclosure.
Right.
And a lot don't. But if they're burning the proper materials that we outline there, there's usually little to no risk of anything.
In the, like, in the non-congested places.
Still want enclosure inside 1-3.
That's what we have now.
Is it on there now? I didn't think it was there.
And it vests in the definition of appliance, so I think we could look into that more, and come back, and when it goes back to the department, that's what we'll direct them to give a clear consensus on.
I would specify clearly that. Or the area, Schedule A is for appliance, Schedule
Yeah.
C is for, doesn't require an appliance.
But like,
Or define define what appliance means.
And if it could be the same for all,
Yeah.
the
that'd be
words
perfect.
would be amazing.
Yeah, it's either watered down for everyone or it's really
Yeah.
tight
Yeah.
for the.
I'd really like to get away from this ward, that ward, and
Same, like,
talk
can we
about
just-
density
yeah.
or.
I don't have a problem with that as long as it's
Yeah, yeah,
not burdensome on the LSDs
Right.
unnecessarily.
agreed.
So,
But I think that we can get there. I think that we
oh,
can,
I have no
can
problem.
write the bylaws in a way where it's accommodating to
Reasonable.
everybody
Yes,
and not overly restrictive, and get away from this area has these rules and this area
Right.
has these rules. Like,
Right, because if the appliance, it can be lessened for Ward 3, but still safe according to the fire department. I think that's.
because to me,
still-
the simplest way to do it is to say that an appliance is required on any lot smaller than an acre or smaller. And anyone in a subdivision is on an acre or smaller. It's just how you want to word
Yeah,
it.
that's an easy rule. That's a great wording.
Because then it doesn't apply to me.
Well, it obviously doesn't apply to anybody that has more space.
Ward 3, once you get into that.
But it's fair, right? It's based on the lot size.
Based on
Also,
the
Yeah.
realistic
I think
expectations.
fire department to give the actual size that they think that would be.
Fair enough. I'm just suggesting. I'm not
We
even,
just don't
I'm
wanna
not demanding
control
it.
But I think so the direction right now that we're hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that other than the definition of appliance, the remainder is common sense and should remain in there. Not like paying attention to it, not putting it on a wood deck, only burning certain materials, only doing it when DNR's burn ban or forest fire watch permits, no flammable material.
That's all risk mitigation stuff, right? Yeah, very
And Darwin,
the
straightforward.
DNR one, and we can put it in there, but regardless, they have to follow that regardless.
yeah,
That's right.
Regardless of the DNR part, they have to follow that. Doesn't matter what. we
That
put
is
in the bylaw,
correct.
They're obligated to follow that.
But
That's
then
right.
Why don't we just reference?
DNR, no. So DNR, you can, if you don't have that clause, if you look on DNR's website, it says contact your municipality if you are in an incorporated area.
Okay.
So most municipalities just say follow that because we're not updating it every day. But unless it's stated there, they have to come here for what our
So
regulations
you're
are.
saying a municipality can override DNR prevention.
No, but DNR doesn't report on municipalities. If you look, it says contact your local government. But I would say most, if not all, probably have that clause in there, but it's not a requirement.
That takes care of bonfires. So fireworks, are we happy with what's in here?
That's a question for
I
you.
think
Yeah.
should apply the same logic.
it's to facilitate finding and to facilitate.
Yeah, it's
It's,
the same risk.
What does that mean?
We remove the ban in Ward 3, is that what we're saying?
No, it'd be like density and like,
Right.
there's gotta be some, because
Yeah.
Like I'm
It's
fine
not a
with
risk.
restricting it in specific areas, but based on density rather than geographical
that's right.
Ward.
boards.
Yeah.
It
which
won't
makes
be
no sense.
wards,
Yeah.
because the wards can change. It will be
Right.
former incorporate, like it'll be former village, those boundaries.
I don't like that. But, I mean,
Because there are subdivisions outside of.
but
the
it
ward.
will be written in a way that it bans them anyway.
Well, I'm
but-
gonna ask the question,
Yeah.
how are you gonna enforce it anyway? Again, I'll go even in our.
Well, we can say that
current
about every bylaw. we
Like-
have.
Yeah.
No, I know, but fireworks today, like Hurricane Larson, every holiday that goes on, even like it's just nonstop. And no one does anything about it.
I think the biggest thing, I think, in my opinion, I think the biggest thing is conversation, education, and then if need be, implementation. So,
Yeah.
you know what, 3-strike rule. I know you did it. Let's have a conversation. And then if they do it again, it's, there's gonna be witnesses and they're gonna, it's gonna be the person next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Dog is taken off.
in the snitch line.
Well, we're not gonna go down that road, but, we can only do what the best what we can, right? And I think once people know that it is gonna be enforced and there is the new bylaws and redone bylaws, then I think if they do it, they just do it maybe for,
Give them a couple of warnings and then have the fines.
Which you can't do if you don't have if you
I
don't have
really,
bylaw.
I really like the density approach, like what Counselor Gallant just said, because it's like, well, it makes sense.
It doesn't just apply.
It's easier to apply the logic to why, because you're closer, you're within that proximity, same as a bonfire. But it has a different level though to it, fireworks, because of the noise.
The density though will apply to some areas in the former LSDs. That's.
It would
okay.
have to though, if that's our,
Yeah.
we need to go in with our our logic is safety.
Yeah.
And if it makes sense, with like logic wise, that it's density reasoning, then we have to use that to.
I like
And
that
apply.
approach rather than meaningless or boundaries.
Yes, I agree.
So
So we have to check on how we do that in the context of a bylaw, but if there is.
Yes, that feels difficult.
Yeah, it's schedules, but anyways, we'll come back with some.
But it goes back to that word common, that's us applying common sense. So
But if you take your firearm safety, right? So I have my firearm safety course, which says that I can't shoot within so many feet of a residence.
400 meters.
Right.
That'll brag for you. Congratulations.
We're not talking density, but it gives that range because of safety reasons, and it's easy to apply logic as to why you're not allowed to do that, right?
Yeah, I just think we have to figure out how to put that in the context.
Yeah.
That's the only, which we'll figure
we'll
out.
come back
Yeah.
with that.
It just seems more fair to me.
Yeah.
It feels good.
So the takeaway, you
I love
have to
it.
come back with those.
Sorry.
Everyone feel happy with that?
So are we,
So what do we do about that? Rick?
are we going with recommendation or are we amending it?
That's fine, those are fine for direction, yeah, so they'll come back with, because it has to go, it'll go to department too, so we'll flag those, what the changes look like. And if there's any other input at that point, before it comes back for first and special.
Are we tabling this or?
No, they got their
Yeah,
direction.
the direction is fine, yeah,
You
'cause
can't
it's
vote on
not,
it.
It's good direction.
Yeah.
Good enough. Okay, moving on to item number
well,
4.
all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Reminded. So we have a motion for a recess, by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Dykstra. Questions, of the motion, no questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Once reminded.
Thank you.
Motion carried, we're now in recess. Councilor Dykstra.
So hard to read through, but like, they're so wordy, because there's all the legalese in it. I was thinking when we met a couple weeks ago.
Okay, do I have a motion to come back in from recess, so moved by Deputy Mayor Glenn, seconded by Councilor Thorne. Questions to the motion? No questions, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Reminded. Motion carried. Moving on to item number 4 in new business, dangerous and unsightly premises bylaw.
We have them switched, sorry, we're gonna do 5.
Animal control.
Animal control bylaw, number 5.
So this is our second bylaw that we're going to discuss this evening. Go. So the overview of this animal control bylaw is dog tags with annual purchase, $10 for neutered and spayed dogs and 30 if not. Putting in administrative penalties for violations such as no dog tags, running at large, causing disturbances, etc. Outlining the process for dangerous dogs following bites on animals and or people. We'll get into that a little bit later. Outlines minimum vaccination requirements and schedule as per local government acts requirements. And outlines standards of care and public control of dogs, such as leash, avoid leaving in motor vehicles, ensuring animals do not cause disturbances, and prohibiting cruelty. So some of the changes that we were working on with the working group, it was suggested that we have the removal of the breed-specific ban, i.e. pit bull and bull terrier. Increase the age of puppies being vaccinated from 3 months to 6 months. And then make sure that the proof of requirement for vaccinations, due to the fact there are different types of vaccinations available and at different times you get 1 year or 3 year vax, stuff like that. Changes to reflect updated administrative structures of the town and flexibility for different animal control service agreements such as in-house and the contracted to the NBSPCA. and standardize that this process is for the full town. And then administrating the penalties as follows. Your first offense is $100, second offense $250, third offense is $500, up to a maximum of $1,500. So the dangerous dog process, it's kind of streamlined a little bit tonight to, oh, sorry, forgot to click the button. So if there was a complaint for alleged bite, an investigation will be undertaken by the NBSPCA or the enforcement officer. Then it will move to the Dangerous Dog Review Committee, which is made up of the CAO, Clerk Enforcement Officer, and the NBSPCA officer to designate the dog as dangerous. If the agreement was that this dog is dangerous, then an issue order will be sent to the owner of the outcome with order in section 151 of the Local Governance Act. If the owner wants to appeal the decision, they have 14 days to write an appeal in writing to the clerk. An appeal panel of 4 councillors with the mayor for a public hearing and private deliberations, post decisions, and then the decision will be made. And then an order will be sent to the owner.
Do we get to be judge?
No questions now or after? Right?
After, yeah.
Yep.
Input required from council, kennel licenses. Do we maintain the current bylaw for kennel licenses? Currently required for 4 or more dogs for commercial purposes. Maximum number of dogs in certain areas. Should we implement that? Maintain removal of breed banned specifics. Should we keep it, or should we just move forward and eliminate that? Maintain authority for officers to enter motor vehicles when animals are in distress. So if somebody's at the big stop or somewhere, they go in and for lunch and to realize I think their dog would be okay, it gives us the opportunity to make a move to save the dog type of things. I don't like seeing that. So as well, maintain the requirements for cats and maintain dangerous dog and appeal process.
With that recommendation on the floor, and then
I'll move the council direct staff to bring the bylaw titled bylaw number 10, a bylaw relating to the establishment of control of animals in Salisbury as drafted for first and second reading at a future council meeting.
Second, moved by Councillor Galena, seconded by Councillor Dykstra. Questions to the motion? Councillor Thorne.
So I have a question about the dangerous dog process, like the 4 steps. Why can't NBSBCA make the decision of like deeming a dog dangerous during their investigation? Because no offense to you all, none of you are professionals at deciding that. I also like putting the onus on like a professional third party to deem that dog dangerous, and then we just
hands off.
hands off of it.
So
Like,
the
are they
piece-
allowed to do that?
The piece was that, so there was more than one person involved in the process. So what the dog review committee, all that committee is doing is making sure that the process of the bylaw was followed
Okay.
and that there's basically due diligence in the process. Because a lot of times, again, if we go back to our conversation last time about common sense and that sort of thing,
Right.
a lot of times animal control every municipality is used for neighbors who do not get along.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
it often is, right? So
But you might know about that disagreements with the neighbors. Like, leave it up to the NBSBCA because they're unbiased. You know what I mean?
but the problem is that it can also be enforced by someone internally who is appointed as an enforcement officer, which will make sure that the NBSPCA is part of that conversation too, for the
Okay.
reverse side of exactly what you're asking.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
why do we need the review? Like, why do we need anything besides the first?
Piece, because then the alternate, so the only way that you can appeal, if they don't call it the exact same thing in the dog control regulation legislation, but The only piece then is that it has to be appealed in court, which can get expensive, quite frankly. And the way that it's right now in the former village is it used to be, it's similar. There was different wording for that first step, but it used to be the counselor that was in charge for animal control. So the only real piece that changes is there's an appeal mechanism if someone says, no, I don't agree with the fact that my dog bit, whatever. If the process was followed and internally that's clear and for sure, then there's at least a mechanism before having to go through the formal legal recourse.
It's also us that are going to court, not SPCA.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because we also have the opposite risk of not deeming a dog dangerous and then it being dangerous.
Right.
So it's like,
Liability.
at what point? Yeah.
I just want them to make the recommendation of whether the dog is dangerous or not and us accept their recommendation. And then it's,
I'll also make a comment that NBSPCA is our current contract.
Right.
Doesn't mean next year it's going to be.
But we would
Could
contract
be
somebody. that-
somebody else.
but it's gonna be somebody else who has like a business. Like, we're not gonna just hire Joe Blow off the street to be our dog protector.
That's what it was like before.
Yeah, but like,
It was a tender.
Just so you know, I'm not interested.
It was a tendered position, and so it could have been you that was the animal control officer. And so when you did your investigation, you brought that back to the group, and the group would, yeah, okay, this needs to be done.
Okay, but like, I think none of us are gonna
And give
agree to
me full-
hire anybody to do that now without prerequisites.
So then
You gotta catch an animal.
the alternate could be that the order is the order and there's no appeal process before the formal order is issued. There are challenges with that, to Diane's point, because any court proceedings, which as soon as there's an order, it then goes in Diane's name if it gets on a court docket. So not knowing that that's being issued could be problematic.
Yeah,
But
Having all the documents, not having all
Yeah. because then it's also our expense if we don't keep that.
then on this committee where it's like the enforcement officer and or the NBS, like, can we force them to sit on that committee? Like, no.
As
matter
long as
and
there
or?
are contracted service.
Sure,
Right?
and or contracted service
Yeah,
provider
we could,
has to sit
yes,
on it.
yes,
But
it could
like-
be like that.
But
Because the other,
take the and or out of it, just and the contract service provider needs to sit on that committee. Cause I want their recommendation to go to you guys because somebody's gonna come back and say, you don't know anything about dogs.
Yeah.
And I wanna make sure that somebody's on that committee who does. You know what I mean?
chances are in this process, they're gonna say that about.
For sure they are, but at least you've covered yourself.
The other piece that can, like, if, yeah, so we kept the process because that was the discussion at the bylaw working committee piece, but you can eliminate that need of having that interim piece, other than there needs to be some sort of notification mechanism.
Yeah.
Which could be in an agreement, but we just signed the agreement, so I don't think that makes sense to reopen, but there needs to be confirmation that we need to make sure the process is followed, that orders were served properly, so on and so forth.
So
Um,
it's really the committee is not deciding whether the dog is dangerous.
No,
The
it's
committee is ensuring
Reviewing
that
the
the dog-
investigation
The process was followed.
It's a review committee.
of an investigation.
That has the service provider sitting on it to make sure that they can explain that the whole process.
It does say that the committee decides if the order needs to be given.
Because an order is the word order triggers a specific process in provincial legislation. So when that's served, then Diane can end up on a court docket. So that's that piece. It's the review of an investigative report as prepared by whomever
But I guess,
took the complaint.
like administratively, I understand it, but what conversation is happening about the specific animal that you are deciding to provide an order for?
Is reviewing a report from, if I'm the SPCA officer, in this case, because they're our provider, the MBSPCA officer, and I bring a report that it's ensuring that the steps were followed and that the proper proof or evidence in a case like this is there, in which case then the order is served by the home or to the property owner.
And
to
they're
the animal.
coming with a recommendation for the order, or are we
The-
deciding
the-
based on the?
The investigative report will say this dog is dangerous, and then that process is,
You.
that process is
So
initiated.
you're just reviewing that everything was done.
Yeah.
You're not,
Take that
you are
cross,
not
pause,
doing
go
anything.
to-
SPCA.
Just
so-
making sure that they follow the steps.
Got it. I like it. I'd like to somehow make it a
and I
process
think-
review committee.
I
I just changed the name.
We could probably do that. They were both committees last time. That's why we changed one to be a panel and committee, because it was confusing.
Just to stir it up a bit.
Yeah,
I don't
The-
enjoy the appeal process.
well, that's the other piece that,
It's something that I think is,
because if the piece is. Yeah, because it's not ideal to have an appeal, but it's very similar to dangerous and unsightly. An appeal process goes to council before it goes to court, if it goes through the appeal process. And so that's why that, I suspect, was that process was there. Because it's the same for other kind of topical or sensitive topics. But it can be appealed to a different, there has to be a process there, or else ultimately the only appeal is.
So instead of appeal, is it review, like a review process?
No, because they would be appealing it. They would have to say,
Can it come to all of us instead of just a group of us so that like nobody singled at it? Or is that too many people?
it can, then it triggers the procedural bylaw notice of meetings like it has.
Yeah, okay, never mind.
So we can say it goes on the next, they have to appeal within 14 days and it goes on the next
Can
council
you
meeting.
do it in a council meeting, like in a public meeting or in a closed session?
So that's
Close
public. Deliberations could be, yeah. But then,
Like that, and then you don't have like just add it to the next.
so then if,
Committee.
let's say, so after our April meeting on April, or whatever date that was, let's say we had a dog bite appeal on April 9th, like a month after, you would have to wait until May 13th to have the appeal
Put the
hearing.
wording that it will be at the next regular council meeting or committee of the whole.
If it's at committee of the whole, then you can't make a decision. And as soon as it goes to all of council, it triggers the
You'd
procedural
have
file.
to do a special meeting.
I see.
You'd have to,
Yeah.
or it could.
Yeah.
A month.
Yeah, and you don't want, especially if the dog
Want
is.
something like that.
You can't put the dog on.
Really?
Yeah.
No, you wanna.
I'm
Jail.
assuming that if we've ordered that a dog is dangerous, until that appeal is done, it is
The
dangerous.
order stands, yeah, it does, yeah.
So if it takes a month, it takes a month.
This is true too.
What happens when an order has been issued? What happens to the dog? Like, even if they're
It's
gonna, like, if they're gonna appeal it,
Needs to be enclosed, needs to be muzzled, like it has to.
Sometimes
yeah.
there's off the property, there's requirements that.
Takes precautions to limit any likelihood
right,
of happening.
okay, sorry, I should have known that.
There's section in the bylaw.
Okay.
yeah, I was trying to.
If you met the dog deed as a dangerous dog.
What if that isn't followed? Then what do we do?
Then there's steps in there where you're contravening a bylaw.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess the question around, like appeal, it can go to a council meeting as long as there's comfort levels around that, and it then becomes a matter of public record,
I
like
prefer it
based.
to go to a council meeting. Honestly, just from the perspective of if we deem this dog not dangerous and don't go forward with an order, because that happens, right? If
Yes,
they appeal
like if
it.
it's not, yes.
I don't know, it's putting the
Does-
resident in an interesting situation
Do-
to be on record. Like, I just don't know that that's necessary.
Public hearing anyway.
But don't you like the transparency of like people knowing that we handled the situation? Or made a decision? I don't know. Whatever how you-
This is a public hearing too, though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. but
It's not public, it's public. The appeal process is public.
It's
like a
not
court.
like
we're not inviting people in.
No,
It's more
it's-
just like it's transparent and
Yeah.
like
I
people
feel
can
like we
read
need to
it.
think about the potential resident that.
So
has
then,
to go.
I guess,
It's your dog and you want to be dragged, how do you want it to go?
I don't want to be recorded on.
Exactly,
live and
therefore,
have it go through that
a little
process.
more
I get it.
quiet would
I
make more
get
sense.
it. You're right.
And to me, no one should be notified who it is.
Mhm.
Whoever's available counselor wise can say yes or no, and we don't even know who it is till we get there.
You make a great point.
Yeah, it's just.
Just how you want to deal with it yourself, if it's your dog.
and the piece, the reason that it goes to council is to have that separation, so that the people that are reviewing the investigation reports and they're not appealing to the SPCA officer that served the order, then appealing to the town who
makes sense.
issued it,
That's like
is that there's
your
that entire separation. If and I don't know how the appeal works in other places, but I don't know if there's another way other than, because then if they appeal to what we have now as the Dangerous Dog Review Committee, they're going to say, well, council had no say in the appeal, and then it goes straight to court. So the only way is there has to be some level of involvement of council as that basically final
No,
say.
I would be the one going to court. It's still council taking the council of Salisbury taking you to court or taking.
Yeah, you're going on behalf of.
Even though I'm going on behalf of you, it's still, so you need to be a part of that decision that you want to take.
I don't think
what you
anybody's
want to go any
arguing that,
further.
No,
Okay,
We're just-
okay,
we're
okay.
talking
But you
only
want awkwardness of the process.
Yeah.
Okay,
process
okay,
and
okay.
not
Yeah.
putting our resident on display,
Trial.
Right.
right? I think it's better in confidence because then there's more.
But that's saying right there, you need quorum, don't you?
If there's a,
To be.
So-
if you counsel. for
So-
instance.
The appeal goes to a
Actually,
panel
that's it, yeah.
and then their recommendation comes to council
No,
for ratification? Or-
Counselors are on that panel.
See, I just don't like pinpointing certain ones out, you know what I mean?
It's
Like, I'd
basically
rather us
whoever's
use the team, but I.
Okay, so you
So
might want
it's,
to back that up.
it's spun
So
up
we
every
put-
time that there's gonna be a panel?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not,
It's not necessarily
beginning
only
of the
4
year,
people,
we-
is it? It's just we need at least 4 people.
For quorum.
but all of us could be here.
If you feel like it.
Do we say, we can make it like that, it's not, I think it
We
might be
had,
like that.
that's how we had it before, because we needed more than just one.
It's just
councillor in
minimum.
That decision, right?
They'll have a minimum of 4 councillors.
Cause the challenge, as soon as you, if you have all, it has to then follow the procedural bylaw,
Right.
has to follow notices, like there's certain.
Yeah,
And then it's like they all are, like our council meetings and committee whole meetings are, it's reported and
So
like
if,
people are saying awkward.
so if we have a panel and everybody shows up, does that become a legal council meeting that,
interesting question.
or do we have
That's
to
a
make
good
sure that
question,
one
too.
person doesn't?
Your homework, Diane.
Yeah, that's a question too.
And if it's kind of, if it's just run by counselors and the mayor,
The clerk will be there.
oh, the clerk will be there.
It's because the
Feel like it
clerk,
already feels like a meeting, but we're trying to like.
No, it's
But
true.
if, no, but if
Skirt
you look
around
at
them.
that, so one incident we had years ago, some people weren't around. So if I'm not here, it doesn't mean it can't take place, because it's not an actual council meeting per se. So your clerk doesn't have to be there, it could just be mayor and council.
the clerk provides the notice of the meeting, like how, the outcome.
Yeah, so it was kind of one of those quickly, like if you have a major incident and you need to do stuff like now, it's a quick and to get it done without having to wait for your meeting, without, the only other way would be to call a special meeting. And then anything legal would have to be closed, and then you'd still have to try to.
I don't know if it would meet the
I don't-
threshold of being legal though. I don't, until it becomes an appeal to the court. like-
Yeah, I'm an after the deal, yeah,
Yeah,
not the first. one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be concerned with the formality of it and the rules around how that panel, and I apologize if that's in the bylaw, I did not read it in depth. Sorry.
Sorry.
I will also
It was
follow
my
that
birthday
short
today and I just got to the agenda package today.
But I think that makes sense, as long as we can do it in,
Yeah.
like in a respectful manner, so the person's not
To me,
feeling. berated
these
or
things have been solved in Moncton and other places. I mean, it's copy and paste.
That's where this came from.
And they didn't even solve it properly. Jeez.
Don't remember exactly who it came from, this part.
I don't know.
Um,
This was the process that was there that was directed to us to keep until we got here, so.
So I'm fine with the composition of a panel and all of that, just how loosey-goosey is it? When somebody comes to an appeal, like,
When it comes to an appeal, there's already, because anytime, as soon as you have an order of any sort, it triggers a very formal
Yeah.
process. And so there's no room for loosey-goosey once those orders are issued. And if someone's appealing, they're formally like, a request is in writing, they're appealing an order. And so there's certain things that we have to follow. That's why certain notices will have to come to the clerk after. If the decision stays the same, so on and so forth. But it's not, are you saying you want it loosey?
no, I'm concerned that if we get into a room like this, we have a resident who's filing an appeal and we're not saying things, or we're saying things that are legally binding that we shouldn't be saying, like,
Yeah,
I'd be concerned about the
Cause you don't have a CA
casualness of
for the
it.
clerk there, and I'm like.
It's a person who's probably a neighbor.
Yeah.
That we know and know of, and,
Can get to see.
yeah, I'd just be a little bit concerned that,
Mhm.
that there's processes and procedures that we should be following in that kind of a meeting
Yeah,
to protect us
but it
and,
should be facilitated.
and make sure that the appeal decision is solid.
Protecting us. That's
So
all.
that
there
is it an issue if we have to follow the
But there's
procedural bylaws?
there's a disconnect between
Like
the
maybe.
process in that meeting too, like we don't have we don't have the SPCA enforcement officer or
They-
anybody.
Because they're
Because
appealing
they
those
want to
people.
do that.
So in those situations, the person who did the investigation would give that, just like they would in court. Like there would be tabling of evidence in this case at the appeal process where,
But in court, wouldn't that person be able to speak as well? Like, I would want to know
And
why. What was their thought process? It's interesting, right? Because we're just gonna get one version and a written version
yes. yeah.
versus a conversation with the
Yes.
people that made the decision and the person that's.
Can the MBSPCA person be invited to
Speak.
be
Yeah.
Like,
at the appeal? Yeah, so like, it's kind of like you're just in court and like,
Yeah.
they'll
It's
be
not
there
their-
as a witness.
Yes.
No.
Well, it's like,
Like a-
yeah, they'll have to.
So,
To fire.
yeah, so things like that, like who speaks first, who has how many minutes, like all of that kind of stuff would make me nervous making an appeal decision.
So that
Make sure that I followed all the rules so that we're not taking to court saying we were unfair in the appeal process.
Yeah.
Or biased.
Mhm.
And I'd like that last piano piece to say that the person who's appealing as well as the people involved in the initial.
that is there, but it will be the recommendation can be specified.
Yeah. because
Okay, so
that's-
we can firm up clarity around process of the recommendation may come back that it follows the procedural bylaw though, just because if it's going to get like that, then there's,
May I ask, how often do we get appeals? Like, has it ever happened before?
This one last year.
it hasn't happened, no?
Not an appeal, no.
No, okay.
Because most of the time, if your dog bites somebody, most people don't try to, they know it's,
Right.
it happened
It
and
is
they're,
investigated thoroughly. by
they
the
investigated, they put it,
It's
they
well
did.
documented, it's
Yeah.
well investigated.
Yeah.
But we've never had
No
an
gray area there.
Right.
appeal of
I
that.
hope we'll never have to get there, but
And the language in the legislation that a judge will rule on would not be in favor of someone appealing. They would not really want that in front of a judge, in my personal
Yeah.
opinion, based on how it's worded. But not to say that someone will take the time to read the
Mhm.
nitty-gritty
Yeah.
pieces of it.
it'd just be, yeah, that's my only thing is where we're taking that recommendation and basically adopting the recommendation probably in 99.9% of the cases, if not 100. Is that if it does get to that appeal process, that individual is there as well as the person that's appealing it, so that there can be a conversation, not just facts.
So
and-
it's 100% recommended by the time we get to the appeal
And
process.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly, but that's why that needs to specify that they're gonna be there because.
It says in there basically that if the owner and or applicant appears in the hearing without counsel, so you can bring counsel if you want, witnesses on his and her or her behalf, the owner and or applicant, I can't even say that word, shall be shall be entitled to hear all evidence presented at the hearing to cross-examine it's like step by step that they can come, they can.
I think the piece, it doesn't specifically, it doesn't state that the investigator will present the evidence. It just says they can
It says
cross-examine.
basically they have a chance to come in and give their side of the story if they think it's on.
And that's in the appeal process.
It's in the step by step, and then it comes out and it says the panel's deliberations may be conducted in private. So them coming to a meeting is an open and public meeting type thing that they can come in and explain, this is not what happened and this is what you know what I mean? And then you can.
But it's very rare that anything gets to that point, and
I would say.
But I would
ours is still doing
think
it.
so, but typically by that time, if you have a dog that bit somebody, the animal control officer usually goes, takes pictures, starts doing all that stuff right at the first. And so even before we had a dangerous dog, we had photos, we had meetings with the people. There was stuff that happened before they even got to the dangerous dog.
I don't deny that process. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure when if we ever get to, because we probably, like we've said, it's never happened, guess what, right? We'll end up in that situation. We just need to make sure that we've got, it might
So,
be something that
it's
the
in
lawyer
there.
wants to facilitate directly,
Yeah, it could be something, yeah.
right? Like the lawyer might say, you know what, this is something I
I mean,
need
they
to.
would have reviewed this when we first put it in, but that's how many years ago?
Yeah, they'll review it now too, but the other piece too is that there's a specific clause, and I don't know where it is, but it basically says like the standard rules of court shall not apply, so that it
Okay.
can't be appealed in front of a judge and say they didn't follow
Okay.
standard legal
Yeah.
process. So that's why that would be there,
I think
but
I just want to make sure there's a grown up in the room to make sure that we followed the process. And by grown up, I mean CAO or the clerk. You know what I mean? Just to
we
make
can
sure.
we can firm up process.
Part of the
That's the-
difficulty of that though is the CAO and the clerk sit on that first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So
it makes it awkward. I don't know if you want to have the assistant clerk
Yeah,
be the person who sits in. on
there
that.
needs to be some sort of designate, whether that's legal
Yeah.
counsel or someone, like
Yeah.
referee,
yeah,
referee.
just somebody to make sure it doesn't get heated amongst.
Bring your whistle off.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Both appear and be fair.
And so I think the formalities of the process, we can look and explore, we can run through the scenarios of what may happen in that. The other pieces that need direction on kennel license, dog, breeds, all of those.
I'm okay with all of those.
Yeah.
I had a problem with one of them, but
Kennel?
I've forgotten.
Oh, if you forgot, too bad, move along.
Kennel, I don't have a problem
The
with that.
vaccination one.
Vaccination one,
'Cause
that's
a
the
lot of
one.
people wait a year.
So
What is the current recommendation for that, and what is the current issue if you're not vaccinating your animals, and why is it anyone's problem in general?
the Local Governance Act
Your business.
has bylaws that you require, procedural bylaw, so on and so forth. One of them is that it needs to be vaccinated against rabies.
Yeah.
So it used to stipulate like, you need to have proof of vaccination at this point, at this point, at this point, at this point, but now there's different ones depending on weight, age, what have you. So when you go through the dog tag process, you need to prove that you have a valid rabies vaccine. Whether that's
And
1 year,
parvovirus.
3 years, yeah, which is based on, as soon as you enact an animal control bylaw, you need to have the vaccination requirements in there.
So then, just out of curiosity, why is it stipulated as proof of vaccination and not proof of rabies vaccination, just out of curiosity?
Rabies,
Cause there's two, kennel and pop.
There's two.
Just,
No,
and distemper and parvovirus.
But if there's one in particular that's required and one that is not, I'm just don't know if there's a distinction between those or.
it's just, there's the 3 that are distinguished there. It's basically the ones that can be transmitted to humans.
Yes,
That's what it is.
There's three.
Yeah.
Okay.
and they're usually given in one shot.
Yeah.
And so when we first did this, again, like he was explaining, when we first did it, there's only a yearly shot. And then now they have a 3-year shot, but then there's some dogs that are too small or too old that can't take that much shot at the same time. So this way, it's not saying that you have to have it every year. It's saying that you just have to have a valid one that's up to date, that's,
And there's provision as well if your dog is not well enough to
Yes.
get the vaccine, right?
so if you have a vet, basically a doctor's note, but a vet's note saying that this dog can't, like, could be allergic to it could be too old.
Yeah.
There are problems like that has happened before, and so as long as we have something from your vet stating that they do not want to see this dog, then we would do the tag for that
Just out of curiosity, how long has this requirement been around? Is this like a long time?
for a very long time.
All right, I just want to make the point that there are. some-
And almost every animal, and every, I would,
If it's not in place in an animal, well, it has to be in place in animal control.
any municipality or whatever would have, it's not a choice, yeah.
It's been a rule on the outside world.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I am indifferent in general. I'm just saying that there is the pitfall of those who are not inclined to vaccinate.
Yeah, and that's not gonna change tomorrow around.
I understand. I'm just saying that may not be a problem today or even tomorrow, but that may become a more prevalent problem in the future. But
And that's basically.
Very happy.
Yeah, cats and, unless there's any, like all of those, so cats, kennel licenses and breed specific bans.
I'm glad we're removing the breed bans. Something that has been asked since we asked Fran, so.
So as far as the puppy one, it was three months. But some puppies are too small at 3 months to get that, so we were just taking the booster shot. So if you're having your first booster shot, it would be considered their shot because they literally can't get it till later, yeah.
They're starting the process at 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But they can't take the full
And
vaccination.
6 months is everybody pretty much has.
pretty much has it by 6 months, yeah, unless you get it.
And they're spayed or neutered.
usually that's the ones too.
What's the story on the breed ban, just out of curiosity?
We
There
didn't.
is one?
There is currently. This is to remove it.
There's just the ban, one way or the other? I'm not familiar.
There's certain types of dog that are.
No, I understand the ban originally, I just, I've not heard one way or the other, pro or con.
People want it gone.
There's very few.
The logic we hear is that, you know, if you're a responsible pet owner, it shouldn't matter what breed it is, right?
Also, in our case, we contract the MBSPCA for animal control. They will not enforce breed-specific bans. They made that very clear.
Oh, that's an excellent.
But that's also why we
Then
did
you
the
look
dangerous
at if something
dog.
happens and you got a dangerous dog.
Because
So
dangerous
one
dog
will
doesn't
cover
necessarily
the
need
other.
Yeah.
As far as this.
Right.
And it covers it for all breeds, not just
Well,
one
it's just
specific breed.
too, yeah.
Just curious, thanks.
Well,
Basically, the only thing is to clarify the dangerous dog
Appeal,
appeal process.
formality, yeah.
And the cats we were keeping in,
That, unless
Yeah.
there's any, unless there's any opposite.
Does that include feral cats?
It just basically says that if you own a cat, you're responsible for it. It's a
Defined
simple.
ownership.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I'll take that.
Hello, God, I could be argumentative for everything.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, at least 15.
All right, so you have your motion?
all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Undecided? Aye. Motion, proceed. Okay, moving on to dangerous and unsightly premises, file item number 5 now.
Sorry. So, okay, so if you like that flow chart from before, I got a doozy one for you at the end of this
Oh,
one.
I can't wait.
So dangerous and unsightly premises, the overview is to adopting, it's pretty straightforward. We're adopting the provincial regulations prescribed by sections 128 to 160. I'm sorry. Undo.
Can't play that anymore.
What?
Can't play that.
Give another month or so.
Bumble first. Sections 128 to 160 of the Act, and the Act provides clear process and guidelines for different scenarios, including unsightly properties and dangerous hazardous buildings. These steps are prescribed in the Act and are limited to changes. So I'll try to explain, I was looking at this today to how to explain it the best way possible. So if a complaint or patrol, myself, notices an unsightly premise or a dangerous and unsightly property, the first step is would be to do an inspection. And then it could either go to an assessment of the building, or it can go to having a conversation with the owner and having them, you know, asking them nicely, and he could clean it up, and then post a follow-up inspection. And then if not, then it goes to an emergency step. Do you believe that would how it would go, Austin?
It's a sake of, it depends on the assessment itself. So normally for an assessment, you're looking at a hazardous building where you have a building inspector or the fire marshal say, this needs to be addressed yesterday. That's when the emergency would get initiated, which essentially there's very clear prescriptions as to when that can be triggered and what can be done in that case. It basically prohibits the opportunity to appeal, is pretty much what it is, because it gives power to, generally, it's a demolition is normally what it is in that instance. It is what I would say rare, but so the assessment is for the hazardous side of things. Yeah. And the piece, like if you go towards the right of the screen, if after follow-up, it's not addressed, then it goes through the process very similar to what we were speaking about earlier of in order. So in the case of dangerous and unsightly, it's called a notice to comply. So it says what you have to do, why you have to do it, by when, and that process is all prescribed in the Act. So it's quite convoluted. And if it's not followed exactly to a T, a judge will not uphold it with this particular piece process in general.
Well, again, unsightly is subjective.
We speak that on the next slide. it's not really subjective in the context of this legislation for the purposes of this legislation. It's
It's.
If you put up a
Yeah.
fence and you can't see it, is it still unsightly?
no, because
So-
it can be, yes. If there's been an order, it can be, yeah.
If
Because if there's an order that says it has to be removed, yes, it can still be. Because it's still there,
But it's unsightable.
but it can be dangerous.
Oh, I'm not disputing it can't be dangerous. That's a different thing.
Unsightly is not what we would conventionally know as
Right.
unsightly. Like, it's not
Okay.
someone's grass is too
Yeah,
tall
it's
or.
not aesthetics
they-
necessarily, it's just safety.
Correct, yeah. And we speak to that in this slide.
So is that more unseemly? Anyways, Karen.
Perhaps, I guess, like.
So to kind of answer your question, Councillor Dykstra, is there a desire to implement a residential occupancy standards bylaw? Separate from an unsightly and dangerous bylaw? And that could cover everything from,
The complaints we often get is garbage.
right,
Like
it's
we've got
garbage
many of them.
or, somebody's grass is 5 feet
Mhm.
high or.
Yeah, but that's wild
Remote.
pollinator habitat.
I mean, somebody's shingles are blown off and they haven't fixed it or whatnot. To the point, in the former village, that could also govern scenarios that may not be to the extent of the dangerous site of property. Confirmation that the town wants to assume dangerous and unsightly premises investigations and responsibilities.
I'll move that council direct staff to bring the bylaw, title bylaw number 9, a bylaw relating to dangerous and unsightly property as drafted for first, second reading at a future council meeting.
Just missed a beat there.
Been moved by Councillor Dykstra, second by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
I don't want to over control again. I just think, like,
So right now they exist anyways. Doesn't
no, but
matter
I
where
mean,
you are.
the, whether, that first question
Oh, okay.
of whether or not we want to
Yeah.
I
get
think-
somebody because they didn't fix their shingles on their roof when
The-
it blew off or.
The residential occupancy piece, I think the ones we hear from are from outside areas.
Yeah.
So that's what brought that
It's
there.
more like a respectful neighbor, policy, but I don't think that you can easily.
Yes,
It
it sounds almost like a.
This is more like derelict buildings, stuff that's.
That's dangerous and unsightly would be, yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, because there's oftentimes, we'll often hear about cases saying, my neighbor has a dangerous or unsightly building. Not necessarily, like it may not meet that threshold and it's often garbage. Raccoons are getting into my neighbor's garbage, and they're coming into my house now. That's not dangerous and unsightly on that basis alone.
But even a dilapidated building that could be dangerous for somebody to go in and enter is one thing, but that's also trespassing on top of it.
That's why the act is very, very prescribed.
Yeah.
So that, oh, you mean the person
If you go
going
into a
Oh.
dangerous and dilapidated building and trespass.
Yeah,
To do so,
yes.
Darwinism, but.
Can you,
Common sense is important.
can you explain to me the first question and why it was put there? Just
So
that-
it was put there because a lot of times, a lot of the complaints that we get, whether it's from residents or forwarded from elected officials, we just want to make sure the council knows that adopting the provincial regulations for dangerous and unsightly will not address all of them,
Right.
because some of them will not be considered dangerous and unsightly.
Yeah.
So when we're forwarded complaints and they're looked into and they're not deemed to meet the threshold of the legislation, which is specific because there's a specific prescribed process, because the powers of the act are very clear. And we say it was looked into and it's case closed, and that garbage is still there and the neighbor still complains because they still have raccoons and rats, because the
So
bylaw wasn't triggered.
I would like
we
to
have to
see
set
a
that.
recommendation from staff on what you guys.
It will
think
be a
should
job.
Like,
This is the
my-
former one, I think.
I think my question is, do you see the need for one? And I think by what you're saying is,
Yes.
yeah, because we get a lot of complaints about it.
I don't know if we get a lot of complaints, it's just a lot of the complaints we get will not meet the dangerous and unsightly
So
threshold.
And
But
by-
therefore,
we get are valid.
but that being said,
Right,
because it does not meet that threshold, is there something that should be below that?
That would be
And
the-
that's-
Residential
Yeah,
occupancy
but just-
standard.
That's exactly it.
It's for us because the dangerous and unsightly, there's an order to comply and you have to clean all of this up, or we're bringing in a crew and they'll do it and we'll foot you the bill and you can appeal to a judge. You have 14 days and that's it.
And that's like derelict buildings and cars.
Yeah, and sometimes they can take months, like those can go on for a long time, as opposed to going to someone and say, can you please dump your
At
garbage?
this level, though, it would be environmental related things that we would care about for that first one. Honestly.
No,
Aesthetically pleasing.
No, but I don't
Aesthetically, like-
think we have a right to tell anybody that they have to paint a building if it's not deemed.
it wouldn't be paint, but it would be like garbage.
Clean up your garbage.
Yeah.
That is environmental to me.
But it could be more than just
It's probably
environmental. It could be,
Pests is usually probably what it is, I
That's
would say.
what I mean, like if it's related to garbage and that's kind of our issue versus you have missing shingles on your roof or you're not painting your shed or stuff like that.
You need your mouse and rat kennel license.
Cause that's, like, to me, that's easier to explain to the person
yeah.
than I don't like that you didn't paint your garage.
I agree.
But if pieces of your house are blowing off and landing in my yard,
But that should be dangerous and unsightly. But
It
that's not-
won't
But
be.
it's not.
I can tell you right now, without an investigation, it won't be.
So do you guys have to come back to us with what's reasonable, that's not a bias type thing? Like, to me, telling somebody they need to paint something because it just looks ugly is not something we would do,
No,
ever.
no.
Or should,
But if
but if
their
stuff,
siding is blowing off, then yeah.
that's right. Two different things though. So we just
Right.
need to make sure we have a list of whatever it is that's recommended.
Recommended.
That's a good one.
Yeah, to facilitate whatever fine structure, to get people to adhere to whatever you're trying to adhere to.
So the existing one goes through.
I just don't want to ever be in a position where we're making people do things aesthetically just because somebody doesn't
No,
like them.
like,
We're
think
putting
that
ourselves in.
We're
that
not an
position.
is that what it is?
HOA.
HOA.
Right?
But we just want to make sure that like,
If it's safe.
Put some tools in place to
Yeah.
tackle some issues that are real and,
Yeah.
and I do know that our staff, and I've been called up to places and it's, I understand why people are frustrated.
We haven't, right? So like, that's where you're gonna have to, somebody's gonna have to put together a, this is what we get calls on and why it's important.
But I'd also say it also should be geared towards, I don't know,
Common sense?
well, common sense to a point, but I think. Speak of the day. Specifically.
thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Towards whatever problem area you're having. If there is a lot of calls that are not able to be met, that meets that threshold to actually be able to do something. But at this other side one, it doesn't all need to be nannying everyone for everything,
Yeah.
over all of it.
We put that there because we want to make sure that if we're indifferent, I would say, we'll go based in the direction, but we just need to make sure that council's aware that if they get complaints, it a lot of times will not meet that threshold
Yeah,
of
And
what
have a
is being.
process to meet some of
Yeah,
those.
I do
claims.
like the idea that this would give you like a,
Recourse.
yeah. And so you can say that, yes, we've done something because while it doesn't meet dangerous and unsightly, it does meet this. And so we have reached out.
There's people that do take pride in their ownership. And they're
Right.
like, here I
Well,
am,
that's,
living by and look at my home. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
and would
But
we,
even
But
still,
you
we
can't make
tell
people fall
somebody
for the
that
same thing
you can't tell
across the
somebody
road.
to paint your yard. paint
Exactly.
your-
No.
If it's not a safety or environmental thing or I just don't feel like we should be.
But I do think that the bylaw should be also adapting to deal with the problems that we're facing. And if we're not necessarily facing any problems per se, the bylaws don't necessarily
The
reflect
ones that
every
get to me are mostly
convention.
garbage.
Okay, so backing up. So question number one is basically asking if council feels that we should have something implemented that discusses residential occupancy, such as cleaning up garbage,
Yes.
possibly mowing lawns, possibly that toilet is not considered a planter in your front lawn. It's,
I don't-
no, but there's certain requirements, you know what? There's absolutely nothing in the unsightly premises that says that I can't put a wash tub in my front yard or a toilet in my front yard, and plant flowers in it.
Yeah.
Because as
But it's
Counselor
policy.
Dykes knows,
That's why we can't put it in there.
but as Counselor Dykes says, what I think is unsightly might not be what you think is unsightly.
Exactly.
And so unsightly wording wise, according to the bylaw that we're talking dangerous and unsightly, is not what we're saying is unsightly right now. It is literally house falling down,
That's what unsightly.
on site.
we're saying we want that,
That's what I'm
but
saying,
we'd like
so-
you to bring us some recommendations
Right.
so we can see what it looks like and decide if it goes too far
And that-
or if we think it's okay.
Yes.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, so if you want us to do that, then that is a separate bylaw than the dangerous and
Yeah.
unsightly
Would
one.
would it be fair to do that, but put it at the bottom of the priority list for bylaws? And see kind of what happens with
What
the
happened, yeah.
unsightly premises, because if we get a complaint on a property that doesn't actually meet the threshold, it's still gonna trigger an investigation, right?
It triggers an inspection.
There's an
Yeah.
inspection.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
if
so
I'm
it's like
taking
this-
photos, and there's garbage and there's a tree branch down that hasn't been taken.
It can be done.
But does anybody notify that homeowner that we've
No.
received
No.
complaints about that?
So this would be in the past, we have done that, because we've tried to clean it up as best we can without, because we didn't have it. So it was, the steps we took at the time were inform them, the
Okay,
person that you
so-
need to clean it up and ask them very nicely and hope that they do it.
Yeah, so my neighbor can make a complaint about my property,
Mhm.
somebody from the town or our appointed official, whatever, can come in, inspect, take pictures of my property,
Mhm.
and I'll never be
You
notified.
may not know.
So what
If
are
they have
we-
to enter on, there's a process.
There's a process.
Yes, but that,
Okay.
if it's something that doesn't need to be addressed, it probably doesn't, it's not gonna warrant that.
Really what we want is a bylaw that's going to give us a mechanism to deal with the extreme cases.
Yeah, that's
Not-
all
Not
bylaws.
the average case, but we
Yeah.
just want to deal with the really bad ones.
But what you're basically saying is you do want two different ones.
Yeah.
That's what-
Yes, yeah,
That's-
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's not gonna be at the top of the priority list. We're getting through
I
these
don't think
three.
it needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Councillor Bannister wanted to say something. Or she said-
Well, I just wanted to, because I know Austin and I have had 3 formal
Most of
complaints.
those, Phyllis, most of those, I can't say exactly on the record, most of those will meet the dangerous and
Yes.
unsightly. That will,
Yes,
yeah.
well, right. So to Nathan, to Counselor Oblinus's point, we need something to deal with these extreme cases.
Mhm.
And how we move through this, I agree that you don't want to have somebody complaining about 2 shingles have fallen off the roof. Or somebody forcing somebody to paint their baby barn or whatever.
Exactly.
There's got to be a happy medium of some sort in between
Yeah.
there, but these dilapidated buildings and things that they are a huge hazard and they are a safety concern. They are a risk to bystanders and to children that are out and about.
So sure.
So you get your direction on that one?
Yep, all in favor.
I like the
All in favor?
I
Contrary minded, aye. Contrary minded. You have your direction moving forward.
Okay, back
Was
up.
that,
You said contrary
He's-
minded, I,
I
or
think he meant to say aye.
Okay. So,
I think it's just the
all in favor?
timing of how it's.
Okay. Okay.
You have your direction, so very good.
So thank you, everyone. I appreciate
you.
it. Good job having
Good job. That's, short covered.
can.
We have a new bylaw eventually that will.
Animal abuse, yeah.
It's not you.
Pardon me?
You're always like this. It's not you.
Like what?
Always ask your life questions. We're always asking.
That's how we grow,
That's right.
asking questions.
All right, so move on to item number 6, K1 financials. Always looking inside.
As if bylaws weren't, let's.
I'm gonna do it really quick because council will receive
Stephanie's
reports.
excited.
Honestly, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Finances are the best part.
So as of March 31st, we are at 25% throughout the year, and we are currently at 28% of anticipated revenues and 19.8% of budget expenses. And I'll just do a quick run through. General government services is at 18.8%, protective services at 25.8%, transportation services at 24.6%, environmental health services at 10.2%, public health services at 22.5%, environmental development services at 15.6, recreation and culture services at 25.2, fiscal services at 1.5. Of course, this is general, which I don't know if I said that at first. With the scale of capital projects and all the projects that we have going on, staff are reviewing the projects and keeping cash flows and anticipated invoices and working on the schedules to make sure that this doesn't present any issues, but we don't have any concerns at this time for the projected expenses, and that's for the general. Utilities budget as of the 31st. Salary expenses are at 25%, administration is at 64%, collection systems, which is repairs and maintenance to the system, at 6%, lift station 21%, treatment and disposal at 50%, billing and collections is at 8%, interest on long-term debt, principal, long-term debt and are all the debentures, and we haven't had them, and they're all post-dated throughout the year, so there's really nothing there right now, but there will be. And capital funds account transfers will be completed at that. A little bit of background, there are several letters that have been sent out to outstanding accounts. Staff will continue to work diligently on collecting these outstanding accounts moving forward, and I guess that's about it, unless somebody else has anything they want to add or questions. Or again, you can come see me anytime.
Nice and early in the year. That's pretty
Yes.
much it.
Well, that's what.
It's just so early.
Like a quarter, everything was around a quarter used, give or take.
We have any motion to accept or? we-
No, it's for information only. If there's no questions, for information only.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. So with that, now we have item number 5, closed session land 68(1)D Local Governance Act. Do I have a motion to put it into closed? Moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Deputy Mayor Deland. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. We'll enter into closed.
And go.
Good. Good motion for back and closed. So moved by Deputy Mayor Deland, seconded by Councilor Thorne. Any questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor? Aye. Reminded, motion carried. Moving back into council session, mayor and councilor statements, inquiries, nothing to, or for me, councilor report.
I'd just like to say that I attended a library board meeting this past week with 2 staff at the library now. They're able to do a lot of activities, so that's really great news. And they also passed a motion at that meeting that the former board member, Margaret Harriman, who had recently passed away, they decided to purchase some books in her honor. So we'll see those come in with a plaque inside that just says it.
Nice.
Additional, statements.
I was able to attend the Tri-Community Volunteer Breakfast put on by Volunteer Center in New Brunswick this past week. Very happy to see a lot of Salisbury residents in representation there.
Thank you. Anybody else? With that, no additional statements.
Move to adjourn.
Well, let me get it out first. So everybody. So moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Dykstra. Questions to the motion? No questions. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.